am glad that each of you are able to be here with us today. And like the announcement slide reels indicated, we do have a ministry day coming up to a local nursing home, and we are collecting a few items. You can check it out on our website, on our announcement page, but scarves and blankets and puzzle books, coloring books, magazines, all those things, if you want to donate them, socks. Residents there love getting that stuff, and so if you want to donate those to our welcome table over the next couple of weeks, we'll be happy to take those. You're more than welcome to go with us and do some ministry with the residents there. We'd love for you to go with us. More information on the announcement page. So today we're going to be looking at Luke chapter 23, and of course, next week is Easter, so we hope that you'll join us and be able to worship with us next Sunday. It's always a special day in the life of a church. But this Sunday, we want to focus on Jesus' death on the cross for us. It's totally appropriate and right that we would do that. And I wanted to highlight in Luke chapter 23, Jesus' interaction with Pilate, the Roman governor, and Herod, the Jewish king, how he stands before both of them and is questioned by them, and his responses to Pilate and Herod. There's some great lessons for us to learn about our own faith and dedication to the Lord based on what we see in Pilate and in Herod. And ultimately, this is going to lead to Jesus' death on the cross, which, according to the foreknowledge of God, is his destiny. And Jesus, make no mistake, Jesus isn't fooled and trapped and killed by these people. They believe themselves to be in control of everything, but really we know God the Father is in control, and Jesus is submitting to the Father's will to offer his life as a sacrifice. His life isn't taken from him, but he lays it down. He has the ability to call in the multitude of angels that were there at his birth. He could call them in to rescue him. Think, one death angel or one destroyer in Egypt killed all the firstborn. And so he could have called the angels to rescue him in that moment of desperation. But he didn't. He willingly laid his life down to pay a penalty that you and I owe. A penalty of sin that stands between us and God. A perfect sacrifice, a perfect lamb had to be slain. And God can't just overlook sin. He can't just ignore it and pretend like it's not there. God is not only a loving God, but he's also a very just God. So there has to be a just payment. And it requires a perfect human being. And since none of us are perfect, we are unable to pay this debt for humanity. But Christ, fully God and fully man, steps in our place and lays down his life as a sacrifice for us. And so all these events are happening that are leading up to this moment. And when you hit Luke chapter 23, the religious establishment is very much vehemently opposed to everything Jesus is. He has offended them. He has called them out. He has humiliated them because of their corruption in the eyes of the people. And they want Jesus not only dead, but they want him to be publicly humiliated. It's not enough to just put an end to him, but they want it done publicly. And ultimately, they're not really allowed to execute capital punishment. They are occupied by Rome. And so they have to appeal to the Roman channels through the right procedures in order to have Jesus publicly executed. Now, of course, we get to the book of Acts later, and it won't stop these people from killing others. I mean, they stoned Stephen to death, and they were more than willing to kill, but they couldn't do it publicly. They didn't have the right to execute. So they have to bring Jesus before the Roman authorities on charges that would matter to the Roman authorities. They can't just come in and say, this guy messes with our religious beliefs, because ultimately the Roman government doesn't care about your religious beliefs. They don't agree with your Jewish religion anyway. You remember the gods of the Romans, Pluto and Saturn and all these, we're thinking about the months of the year and the planets, and so they have their own system of religion, and they don't really care if Jesus is subverting the Jewish faith. It's not important to them. So what they're going to do is they're going to bring Jesus up on charges of sedition, charges of causing riots, claiming to be a king against Caesar. And that's something that maybe Pilate, a Roman governor, would care about. And they got to get all this done because it's got to happen quick, because the day that they're bringing this weekend, is Passover. It's not an accident, that Christ dies on Passover. When the Passover lamb's blood was poured out to protect the children of Israel in Egypt, Jesus is the lamb that his blood protects us. And it's no accident that this is all happening at the celebration of Passover. And so think about it. These religious leaders are so in a hurry to celebrate their religious festival, they have no time to really consider that they're crucifying the Son of God. And it's the darkest moment in history, but it's in this moment that everything changes for us as humans. It's a pivotal moment when our calendar changes, because God has finished this work that has been prophesied for centuries. And so the whole assembly of religious leaders, they bring Jesus to Pilate. They led him to Pilate. Pilate has the ability to execute. And so they bring him there hoping to convince Pilate and threaten Pilate, if they need to put Jesus to death. They began to accuse him, saying, "We have found this man subverting our nation." False charges. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar. Also false charges. Jesus never said, "Don't pay your taxes." In fact, he said, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's." I don't know if you guys have noticed, but taxes always seem to go up. It doesn't ever seem like they go down, and they find new ways to attach taxes to just about everything. And so, what does the government care about? They care about how much money are we supposed to get from you people. They should care about how do we protect you and make you successful, but often governments are prone to corruption. And this is something that might get Pilate's attention. I don't care about your religious beliefs, but somebody telling people not to pay taxes, now that's something that we need to know about. That's something we need to deal with. These are false charges. And we'll see false charges. We'll see scandal. Jesus will actually stand before Pilate and Herod and the Sanhedrin. 6 different trials, 6 different court cases. So fake news, fake trials, fake charges, corruptions, scandal, taxes. It doesn't sound like much has changed in the last 2,000 years. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be a Messiah. They don't care about a Messiah. That's a religious thing. Has a religious connotation to it. Except a Messiah could be a threat if this Messiah is a sword-carrying soldier of a Messiah, like everybody expects the Messiah to be. And notice how they insert this phrase, a king. Now that claim is partially true. Jesus does claim to be a king. In fact, the week before on Palm Sunday, the crowd was calling him a king. And after he fed the crowds the bread and the fish, it says the crowds tried to make him a king by force, but he withdrew from them. So in a sense, Jesus really is a king. It's just he's not a political threat to Caesar or to a Roman government. He is a threat to you spiritually, and he will shake up your value system and your belief system and your structure of your universe. But he's not trying to become an earthly king. If he could save humanity by being an earthly king, then maybe he would have done that. But you can't save humanity by being a political king. And so they're taking things that have been said around Jesus, said about Jesus, and they are trying to turn these into accusations and charges that could put him at jeopardy against the Roman government. They're trying to make him sound like he's threatening the Roman government in some way. Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And notice Jesus' response. He says, "Well, that's what you say." Or what do you say? Or that's what you said. Or you say I am. Notice how Jesus doesn't argue, he doesn't debate, he just kind of responds in this ambiguous way with, "Is that what you're saying?" And Pilate, I imagine there's more conversation that happens that's just not recorded here, but Pilate announces to the chief priests and to the crowds, I don't find any basis for charge against this man. Now, maybe he's not in his right mind. Maybe he's a little bit deranged. He thinks himself to be some kind of important religious figure and claiming to do all these miracles, which we don't have any evidence here in this courtroom. And Pilate knows what is required for somebody to be executed, and after examining him, he turns him around to the people that are wanting him dead and says, there's no basis for charges. Like, this case needs to be thrown out. This is not legitimate. There's no charges here. There's no crime here. So we know now how Pilate views this. That's going to come important later. But we know that Pilate believes Jesus to be innocent in terms of doing anything requiring or, execution. Pilate announced to the chief priests and the crowd, I find no basis for charge against this man. Now, Pilate has been set up by the Roman government, like many other governors, to make sure he maintains order in his region. And he's over Judea, Jerusalem, that whole area. And his job is to maintain order in what could be, as still is today, a volatile place on the map. And now, when they can't get Pilate persuaded with the charges they've brought him, he's trying to stir our nation up. Really, they're the ones stirring the nation up. They always accuse the innocent person of exactly what they're doing. They're stirring the nation up. He's saying, don't pay taxes to Caesar. He claims to be a king, a threat against Caesar. Now, all of this, realize, is so ironic and so false and so fake because this is what they want. They want to overthrow Rome. They legitimately want to destroy Rome and Caesar, and they're praying for a Messiah who will come with a dagger and inspire all other men to carry swords against Rome, believing that if all of us will attack at the same time, God will establish a kingdom and destroy our Roman enemies. These are the people that hate Caesar. These are the people that hate Rome. Notice they're accusing Jesus of what really is their crime. They're claiming that Jesus is stirring people up against Rome. Well, that's exactly what they do. Often happens like that in politics. They accuse people of exactly what they do. And then when they can't get Pilate's attention, look how they turn it up. They say, he stirs up the people all over Judea by his teaching. He started in Galilee and he's come all the way here. He's stirring up. If you don't suppress this, Pilate, there's going to be a riot. And see, this is really the threat that's going to get Pilate's attention, because maybe Pilate's days are numbered. There's been problems in the past, and Pilate has the responsibility of keeping order, of maintaining order. And basically what the religious leaders are doing now is they're threatening Pilate that if something doesn't happen to this man, you never know what might happen. Something could get stirred up. And that would look bad for you as the governor if you can't keep order. What might Caesar think of you if you can't keep order? Notice they're saying Jesus stirs up the crowd, but that's exactly what they're doing and what they intend to do if Pilate doesn't give them what they want and cave to their demands. Now, when Pilate hears the word Galilee, because they threw that out there. He started in Galilee, in Nazareth, up in the northern region, and he's brought it all the way down here into Jerusalem. When he hears the word Galilee, Pilate sees a way out. And the way out is, there's 4 governors, technically, and one of them is Herod Antipas, or Antipas, or however you say him. Herod Antipas is one of the sons of Herod the Great. Herod the Great is the Herod. Herod is like a king name, right? It's not a first name. But Herod the Great was the Herod that had all the baby boys killed in Bethlehem when Jesus was born. Well, Herod the Great died, and he left his kingdom to his 4 sons, and the kingdom was divided into 4 different regions, and they became what are called tetrarchs, which means ruler of 4 quadrants. Well, one of them, I think, died and was replaced by Pilate. And so Herod Antipas is one of the remaining sons, and he has the dominion up in Galilee. So when Pilate hears Galilee, he says, oh, wait a minute, I could push this off to Herod Antipas, the one who had John the Baptist killed. And Herod could rule and make the decision about what to do with Jesus, and that way I'm out of it. I stay clean, my record stays clean, and if they get mad at Herod, not at me. And so Pilate sees a way to kind of maneuver politically to get himself out of this position and put it on someone else. In other words, oh, well, this should be his jurisdiction, not mine. So let's move the problem to Herod. Herod happens to be in Jerusalem because it is the weekend of the Passover. So he and his entourage are here, and let's just assume he's right down the street. And so let's move everything to Herod. Now, Herod is maybe 10 times worse than Pilate, because at least Pilate seems reasonable. Pilate is trying to listen to the case. He's observing. He's asking questions. He's engaged. He's really trying to understand the situation, even though himself, he's not Jewish. He's trying to understand the situation, and he's trying to offer a legitimate decision in this case. Herod is just corrupt. There's just nothing good about him. And so when Jesus moves to Herod, listen to what happens. Herod saw Jesus, and he was greatly pleased, because for a long time he'd been wanting to see him. He was excited because Jesus has got this reputation of doing signs and wonders and miracles, and he's a celebrity. So Herod is enamored with Jesus and is excited. Oh, I've heard all kinds of things about him. I'd really like to see this person. And so he's enamored with Jesus because Jesus is spectacular. He has no intentions of really surrendering or following or honoring in any way the Lord. But he's enamored with him because Jesus is miraculous. And so I've been wanting to see him. From what he'd heard about him, he hoped to see him perform a sign of some sort. So what does that mean? He hopes Jesus will do something miraculous. Oh, this is going to be good. Go get that person with the walker. Sean, come on down here. Come down here with your walker. Get that person that's got that, that busted hip. Let's see what he can do. I've heard all kinds of interesting things about this guy. Let's see what he does. Well, okay, and look what it says. He plied him with many questions, but Jesus gave him no answer. Jesus doesn't even respond to him. With Pilate, at least he somewhat responded. But remember, this is 700 years ago. Isaiah prophesied that like a lamb before the shearers is silent, Jesus utters no words to those who are going to execute him. He's not debating with them. He's not pleading his case. He's not begging for mercy on behalf of the court. He knows what he has to do, and he knows that nothing these guys is going to say or do is going to stop his mission that's ordained since the beginning of time. And so Herod is provoking him, asking questions, wants to see a sign, wants him to do something miraculous, and Jesus, like a lamb before the shearers is silent, makes no response to Herod at all. Now watch what happens next, and maybe this is an indication why Jesus doesn't talk, because you can see Herod's heart in the next moment. Because if you just read the beginning, you might think, what? Jesus, why wouldn't you talk to this guy? He's asking questions. He wants to know. He knows that he's heard that you're miraculous. This is your opportunity to save yourself. But look at what happens next, and you'll see Jesus can see the heart. The chief priests and the teachers of the law were standing there vehemently accusing him. So they follow Jesus, pointing and yelling, and look at what Herod does. Then Herod and his soldiers ridiculed and mocked him. So when he was asking questions, you might think that his heart was genuine and fair, but now we see what his heart really is. He just wants to humiliate Jesus. When he has the opportunity, he's ridiculing and mocking and making fun of Jesus. In fact, dressing him up in the robe of a king. Oh, you're a king? Well, come on, get the robe out, get the crown, get the scepter. And they dress Jesus up and mock him and ridicule him because he claims to be a king. Go ahead, let's see what you can do. Be a king. And then they send him back to Pilate. I think it's interesting, these two different individuals, and let's start with Herod, and then we'll come back to Pilate. There are some people that you and I will interact with that have a lot of questions about the Lord. They have a lot of questions about the Bible. They have a lot of questions about Jesus, a lot of questions about your faith. And they're asking you all these questions, and you're tempted to think they really want to know. And so you share. You open your mouth. You tell them what's going on in your life. You make yourself vulnerable, and you share your experience. You share your church. You talk about your faith. And then you find out at some point in the conversation, they don't really want to know, with any expectation of their own life changing. They're just poking at your belief system because they ultimately want to undermine it and challenge you and maybe even laugh at you. And you might walk away from that and think, what did I say wrong? How come? I mean, I tried to tell them, I tried to share my faith. I tried to tell them what God has done for my life. I tried to tell them who I was and what happened and how I met the Lord. And they just laughed at me. Like they just made fun of me. I must have messed this up. Maybe I just don't have the gift. Maybe I shouldn't share my faith. Maybe I should just keep it to myself, because obviously when I share my faith with somebody, it doesn't work. I mean, they just got angrier. They just got more upset, or they just started laughing at me. They just humiliated me. Maybe I just don't have the gift. Well, and the reality is, maybe it's not you at all. Maybe it's not what you said or how you said it. It may be that their heart is not receptive to the Lord. And so they're asking questions, but it's not because they're receptive. They're asking questions so that they can undermine, belittle, and humiliate you and your faith. And as believers, we need to be as innocent as doves, but as wise as serpents. And what is something that Jesus also said? He said in Matthew chapter 7, do not give your, how does he say it? I think I even wrote it down here. Don't give dogs what is sacred, and do not cast your pearls before swine. Now let me say that again, because you might have heard that. Like, what? Do not give dogs what is sacred, and do not cast your pearls before swine, or before pigs. And what does he mean by this? Now, Jesus himself said this, okay? What he means is, there are things in life that are honorable, that are beautiful, that are wonderful, that are important to you. Trish plays the violin. I'm sure that violin is very important to her. It would be a huge mistake for her to say, I love my violin and I also love my dog so much. I think I need to bring them together. I need to play my violin for the dog and then leave it on the floor. Maybe put it in the cage with the dog so the dog can admire it and so that the dog can love it too. That would be a huge mistake. You don't give your wedding photo album to your dog. Because it's predictable, 100% predictable what's going to happen. If you leave something of value to it, that's not meaning the dog is evil. It's not saying the pigs or the dogs are evil. They just do not know how to evaluate something of value. You could take something very valuable like a violin, a precious heirloom, a photo album, something that's very important to you, and you could give it to a dog, and it's pretty predictable what's going to happen to it. The dog's not going to go, oh, wow, this is really something to look at. The dog's just going to think it's something to tear up because they do not evaluate it. Now, Paul will say in 1 Corinthians that the natural person does not accurately evaluate the things of the Spirit, nor can they. And so Herod is a good example of this. You don't give pearls to pigs, not because pigs are evil, but because what is a pig going to do? The pig's going to look at it and say, is this something to eat? No, it's not something to eat. So what are they going to do? They're going to trample it into all of the mud and all of the mire and not see any value in it. When Jesus is before Herod, Herod looks at him and he says, how can I use this? How can I use this person? How can I use his power and his ability in some way to further my agenda? Oh, I can't? Well, then it is of no value to me. Let's humiliate it and make fun of it and dismiss it. Then we look back at Pilate. Pilate's a little bit of a different character. Pilate actually, I think, is trying to throw logic and reason into the mix and to be a sensible person who wants to do the right thing. So he doesn't just have an emotional response, oh wow, this is exciting, but he actually is trying to solve it and figure it out and make a legitimate decision. But Pilate has his other problem, and that is he cares way too much about what the people around him think. After all, remember, he's a politician. And this has got to be an incredible struggle for politicians, because I'm sure many of them start with the right motives, with the right agenda, I want to make this city, this town, this state, this country a better, safer, stronger world for my constituents. And I'm sure many politicians go in to the business with that mindset, but at some point, the real danger and threat to politicians is, I just got to save my career. I just got to protect and make sure that the media doesn't in some way smear. I got to make sure that people don't see this part of my life, and I got to make sure that I get elected on election day. And it could become about their career and no longer about the citizens. And of course, at that point, it becomes corrupt. And Pilate is a politician. And so he does exactly what you might think a politician is known for doing. I'm not saying every politician is like this, just like I'm saying every used car salesman or every crazy-haired preacher, there's good and bad in all of us, right? And Pilate, though, he has the problem that a lot of politicians have. Pilate called together the chief priests, this is verse 13, and the rulers of the people, and he said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion." I think Pilate knows it's not him, it's you guys. He's not inciting people to rebellion. It's you guys that are inciting people to rebellion. I think he's a level-headed person. "I have examined him in your presence. I've tried him. I've asked him the questions. I've evaluated him." And I think Pilate is like, look, I deal with criminals all the time. I know the difference. I deal with people who are truly a threat to society. We have them locked up in the dungeon, and they're being crucified. I know who a legitimate threat is when I see it. This man is not a legitimate threat. I find no basis. Notice how he says it. I find no basis. Not some, not a little, but no basis for your charges against him. What is he saying? He's declaring Jesus innocent. "I have examined him in your presence. Neither has Herod. I sent him to the other guy. The other guy examined him and sent him back and said no basis for charges." As you can see, he's done nothing to deserve death. Now, it sounds like Pilate feels very strongly about this, doesn't it? If you were to stand before a judge and the judge gave you that speech, you would think, okay, I'm innocent. Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. It doesn't matter what the crowds and the lawyers and everybody else is saying. When the judge, the person who has the power to execute, says, no basis, no charges, not guilty, you're supposed to be let go now. That's not what happens. And this is where you see Pilate's heart and Pilate's fear. Look at what he says in verse 16. "Therefore, I will punish him and release him." Wait, why punish him? You see, he's already starting to bend to the will of the people. Because Pilate, being a politician, knows, I can't let this get out of hand. You know what? Maybe I can placate the crowd and protect an innocent person by just having him punished. And when people see him bleeding, when they see him weak, when they see him defeated, then all this will go away and they'll realize he's not really a threat to anybody. Look, he's human just like you and I. I'll just have him flogged, I'll have him whipped, I'll have him humiliated, and then the people will calm down and everything will go back to normal. And I get it, and I think all of us can understand it, and all of us at times might be prone to do this, but it's not right. You don't punish an innocent person. Pilate knows what is right. You can see he's revealed what he believes in his heart is right. And notice how, in order to win the crowds, he moves away from what he knows is right to try to make peace with the crowd. And once he starts down that road, it'll take him further than he's able to realize and to stop. The whole crowd shouts, "Crucify him, away with him, we want Barabbas." And Barabbas actually is a rebellious murderer. He is exactly what they want Jesus to be, maybe. An insurrectionist, rebellious against Rome. And so they're calling out, there's our hero, the criminal. Criminals elect criminals. Criminals want criminals in the society. They release them. They don't charge them bail, they send them back out. Because criminal empires love criminals. And look at who they call. Barabbas. That's the guy we want. Release him on Passover. It's the tradition to release one criminal. They want the insurrectionist. Here's the people saying, Jesus is an insurrectionist. But when they have the opportunity to free someone from prison, who do they want to free? The murderer, the insurrectionist. It shows you that's their crime, not the Lord's. Wanting to release Jesus, Pilate not only knows the truth, but look, he has a determination. He wants to let Jesus go. He wants to release Jesus because he knows he's innocent. Pilate appeals to them again. And they shouted, "Crucify, crucify." Deuteronomy chapter 21:23 says, to die on a cross or to die on a tree is to be cursed by God. They need everybody to see that this man Jesus is under God's curse. Which he is for you and I. He becomes a curse to remove our curse. For the third time he spoke to them. Why? What crime has this man committed? I find in him no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore, I'll punish him and I'll release him. 3 times Pilate went back to the crowd and said, "Innocent, innocent, innocent." But with loud shouts, they insistently demanded that he be crucified, and their shouts prevailed. Verse 24, Pilate decided to grant their demand. Notice, it's not because Jesus is guilty. It's not because Jesus did anything wrong. It's not because, what is it? What is the reason? It's because at the end of the day, regardless of what Pilate says he believes, he's trying to protect his career. He's trying to protect his agenda. He's trying to protect his family. And so Pilate, unlike Herod, Pilate represents those times in our lives when we know what the right thing to do is. We know the truth. We know what we believe. But we are prone to be quiet or to cave or to try to appease rather than to stand up for the truth we know and the Lord we know. And I think in this way, Herod and Pilate, we can point at them and say, they're bad. And yes, they are. But I think the bigger lesson is you and I at times can be just like them. There are times when I don't want to hear what the preacher has to say. I really don't. I don't want to hear what the Bible has to say. I really don't. I've already made up my mind. Like Herod, I'm just not receptive. I would rather point out the 5 things wrong with a church than ever go and commit to any church. But then there's other times where we're more like Pilate, like, I know what the Bible says, I know what the Lord says, but I just don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to upset anybody. I don't want people to be mad. I want to keep the peace. I want there to be harmony. And so I better be careful that I don't say anything or take too strong a stand because I don't want to upset. And then people will be mad at me, and then people will be upset with me. Pilate and Herod, realize this. Let's fast forward to the end. Pilate and Herod will one day stand before God. They will stand before Jesus as their judge. Think about that. Ultimately, he is the righteous judge. And all of us, with them, will stand before the Lord. And we would have no hope if it wasn't for the sacrifice that Christ made for us. And ultimately, all of this is going to lead to God's purpose and plan for Jesus to lay down his life on the cross with thieves on both sides of him. A friend of sinners, a friend of prostitutes, a friend of drunks, a friend of the outcast, the diseased. And he died the way he lived, right between the worst of us. He said, I didn't come to call the righteous, I came to call sinners. What a Savior we have. What a Lord we have. What a God we have. That whether it's in our best of moments or in our worst of moments, all of us can be just like Herod and Pilate. And we have a grace that knows no bounds, a grace that is greater than our sin.